Well, welcome back to the Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You podcast. My name is Sean Langwell and I am your host. And if you like honest, vulnerable, and real stories about what it takes to not only become great, but self-confident and bold enough to be yourself, then this show is for you. Each of my guests started out as ordinary people like you and me, but have accomplished extraordinary things in their lives to be considered great masters or experts at what they have been called to do. Join me each episode for inspiring, encouraging, and meaningful conversations with diverse people from all walks of life and industry. Leaders and brave individuals who offer unique insights into the fields of arts, entertainment, business, finance, technology, healthcare, sports, psychology, recovery, self-improvement, personal growth, and so much more. Whether you're in the same fields as my guests or not, I guarantee you will walk away from each episode feeling better about yourself and inspired to take the next bold step toward your own goals and aspirations. Your life will improve if you dare to be great and dare to be you. And folks, I have a gentleman by the name of Alex Alexander here, and Alex is a graduate of West Point and Harvard Business School. He's a smart guy, a decorated veteran, U.S. Army captain, and a survivor of a multidimensional career, including, listen to this, corporate banking, management consulting with Stanford Research Institute, academia, teaching leadership and business strategy at two respected colleges, and 3 decades of business coaching. He is the author of several books, numerous articles on business and leadership, and is a features columnist for a local newspaper. He currently lives in Santa Rosa, with his amazing wife, Allie. Welcome, Alex.
Well, thanks for welcoming me. Boy, I like this. I'm a leader in all those good things, huh?
I know, and I think you qualify for the show. And for those who are just tuning in for the very first time, you don't have to have a long CV and you don't have to have all these accolades. But the main reason I've got you on the show today, Alex, is you've got a life of experience, and we could probably talk for 3 hours, but we're going to focus today primarily on some of the work you're doing and have been doing in the executive and leadership coaching industry. You've written a couple books. If you want to hold those up for those, since you showed me beforehand, there's two books
Okay.
that we encourage people to get and pick up. One is Leader Mind, the other is The Goldfish Effect. Um, let's start with Leader Mind and just give us a quick dissertation so if people were inclined to want to go get that. And then we're going to jump into a Q&A session here where you get to share some
Okay.
of your experience and wisdom with our listening audience.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm going to anger you by violating your direction. I'm going to go with goldfish effect first
That's fine.
because that's the more fundamental one.
Okay.
The goldfish effect talks about the human mind and how it, in natural ways, misleads us. Um, you've heard of things like called cognitive biases, right?
Sure.
Okay, well, the cognitive science has looked at those. There are like 220 of them listed now, and they grow every year. There's a bunch of them. They're misleading. Like this one called simplification. Our brains want to simplify everything, and that's okay when it works. But a lot of things aren't simplifiable, or if you simplify them, they're misleading. That's just one example.
Sure.
Okay, now cognitive science applied to leadership is where I go with this one. Uh, this is probably, you won't find a book like this anywhere because none of them yet have learned how to take cognitive science and apply it to various fields of endeavor. Specifically, leadership is this one. Um, when I started the study 15, 20 years ago, cognitive science, I was just blown away by it. But I was also disappointed because the cognitive science books explain a lot about your brain, but they don't tell you what to do about the things that go wrong. As it happens, through a lifetime of coaching, using methods I did not know were cognitive science based, I was actually doing these methods. So I've been able to combine cognitive science with a practice of how you employ it in life in the field of coaching. So those are my two books, and hope people will go buy them. I think they'll get a lot of value out of them. Later on, I'm hoping that I can give away some techniques that might be immediately useful for your audience if they choose to give them a try.
Well, this is perfect, and you've got a head start, for lack of a better term, just by virtue of your experience in having these conversations. You touched on something with the cognitive science slash the thinking about it, the understanding of it. But I agree with you wholeheartedly, which is why I live and breathe in this space of personal growth that is based on actual practical wisdom. And albeit it's not research based, other than the fact that most of what I write is based on 40 years plus of my own personal experience and being in advertising and marketing, working with a lot of executives as a salesperson, having these conversations. But you're absolutely right. It's real easy for us to read a book by Daniel Coleman or all the Maxwell books on leadership, et cetera, which is great because it gives us a baseline. But tell the listening audience this epiphany, if you will, of
Yeah.
why you wrote what you did and how they can start to apply some of this, whether they read your book or get the free giveaway that you give them later,
Yeah.
because this is something that I think a lot of businesses are missing, right, Alex?
Yeah. On leadership, let me, all the books on leadership, and virtually all of them, are focused on behavior
Mm-hmm.
and how to be a leader, what to do, how to act, what practices to put in place, how to develop your emotional intelligence and all that stuff. But there's a more fundamental level. Behavior is determined by cognition, by your thought process, by your brain. Your
Mm-hmm.
personality is governed by your brain. Um, so if you let me step back away from leadership just to generally, how do you cope with life and career and relationships? You're born with a basic mental capability, your basic temperament and the basic mental, it's IQ, it's motivation, it's emotional reactions to things. That's all in the cognition bailiwick. You're born with that. And the popular wisdom is that that's fixed. Your IQ is what it is for life.
Mm-hmm.
Your temperament, you modify it a little bit. You learn some things as you grow older, but basically the same. Um, so what you have to go with in life, you start out with your cognitive abilities. You get education. The more education, the better the education, the more you lift your potential up for being successful in any endeavor. You get experience. You work hard. You're motivated. You go at it. So your education and your experience together, given your underlying cognitive ability, is what governs how far you're going to go in life. What is not understood is that cognitive ability can be enhanced. In fact, the subtitle of one of my books is Upgrade Your Mind. And the analogy is computers always overused as an analogy to the mind, but it's apt in this case. If you buy a computer, it has certain limitations. It has a certain amount of memory, processing speeds, and all that. But if you program it, if you use different programs on it, it'll be more or less effective. It'll do what you want it to do. So the same thing happens with the mind. You've got a mind that has fixed physical capability and the brain power, but you can learn to use it better.
Mm-hmm.
And what you learn to do is to understand what it is that drives the way you think and how that then drives your behavior, how you act in the world. Um, so that it comes down to, I'm going to oversimplify things here, but it comes down to two, what I call habits of mind. And most of these things operate at an unconscious level. Habits of thinking, which is the way you think, that's cognition, and habits of being, which is your personality. And both of those things are working for you, but sometimes against you. Uh, so
Right.
that's sort of the basic scheme.
And where I hear, I mean, depending on the listen, I've got a pretty sophisticated listening audience. And what I'm hearing you say too is it's almost I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's some of what Jung talked about too with the separation of the id and the ego and the super ego, as well as the cognitive ability. But the behavioral and the being aspect almost tiptoes along the line of metaphysical science, if you will, not necessarily quantum physics, but the spiritual side that is a big part for a lot of people just in general. 97% of the people believe in some spiritual being
Yeah.
greater than themselves. And we're not talking about that directly, but I do want you to expand upon this difference of, I mean, you kind of alluded to it, the two minds. There's the thinking mind and the being mind. And there's a third mind there, but I'll go there later. But talk in your terms of,
Well, yeah. I don't want you to scare people away with metaphysics and all that. This is really basic, fundamental stuff. How habits are formed and how are they
okay,
reformed. And that's just everyday practical stuff. Everyone already knows how to create a habit. They usually don't do it consciously. Habits usually form with repetitive behavior in an unconscious way. You walk the way you walk because that's how you learned when you were a kid, and that's what you still do unless you have an injury. Then you'll learn to walk a different way, and that becomes a habit. Or your conscious mind says, I want to go to the kitchen, but your unconscious mind moves your legs to get you there.
Right.
So it's basically taking what your mind already does and making it work better for you. Um, and the habits of thinking, the ones that send you off in weird directions are the cognitive biases, like the confirmation bias. That's the
Hmm.
one, most people are kind of familiar with that, but that's where when you have a belief or an understanding of something, you tend to see the world in alignment with that belief, and new experiences tend to conform with that in your mind. That'll get in your way sometimes when your initial beliefs aren't really aligned with reality. So you have to learn something about cognitive biases, and then there's ways to overcome them. But first, you have to be aware of them and believe that they're happening within you. Maybe more troublesome because they're more deeply buried as personality traits. You want me
Hmm.
to give you an example? I'll use myself. Um, And I used to be a conflict avoider. And that's a guy who wants to make everything nice and make everybody get along. And when you talk to people, you give them positive feedback, but you ignore the negative feedback and all that. And I discovered by accident that I was a conflict avoider. And late in life, I was in my 50s, and my boss called me into the office. He and his wife were running the business. And he sat me down in front of me. He says, Alex, you son of a two-faced son of a bitch, you're playing us off against each other. And I thought, what? I'm a nice guy. I'm a good guy. I'm supporting both of you. And they said, well, okay, you're talking to my wife, and she and I disagree on the strategy of this business. You're talking to her and telling her she's right. You're talking to me and telling me I'm right. And the two of us are arguing. Now, I had the skills and knowledge to help them work together to find the strategy that took advantage of both of their points of view.
Hmm.
Because of my conflict avoidance, and it was mostly imaginary conflicts, I was being nice to him and nice to her and not being of service to them at all. And I almost got fired over that. They kept me on board. So, I was aware that I was conflict avoidant, and I had to build a new habit. And I've got the process for doing this in my books here. I had to build a new habit that I had to recognize when I'm falling into this conflict avoidance trap. And then I had to build a new habit that would ultimately become my automatic habit, not something I had to think about every time it happened, because that slows you down and you can't even have a conversation if you think every word you're saying. I had to build a habit, practice it until that new habit became automatic and unconscious. And here I am. So now I can take on a conflict. I'd still rather not, but I can take it on when I need to and do a good job of it.
So you alluded to in the beginning, as we started the show too, that there is this capacity. We're not born with the fixed capacity for this, that a lot of this behavior, whether it's thinking or being, is a skill that can be practiced and changed. So let's dig into that a little bit deeper without you've written the books
Okay.
about it, but just to give the audience a taste of how that process works or what you've discovered in working with clients for 30 years. What are some of the challenges? I guess let's frame it like this. Use a hypothetical. You can, hypothesize about previous clients or whatever, but give us a tangible scenario of something that may be a shift that you needed to impart and coach to, because that's tangible, and the tangible is what we will gravitate towards. If it's
Yeah.
just at the real metaphysical, they won't. You're right.
Yep. The biggest obstacle is people think their minds are just fine. It's your mind that's not as good. My mind works great. It's your mind that has all these problems. And so the big obstacle is getting them to recognize that every human being has these inclinations towards cognitive biases and personality traits that work for them most of the time, but in some situations might not. Conflict avoidance works if you're a mediator. It doesn't work if you're a leader. So
Mhm.
that's just one example. There's lots of others. There are impulsive people. You ask an impulsive person about what his characteristics, he'll say, I'm decisive. I'm intuitive. I make quick decisions and act on them fast. He's not impulsive in his point of view. He's, solid. But impulsivity leads to quick, hasty decision making, and in serious situations, sometimes doesn't serve you well. So, A, getting the recognition that we all have these traits, what they are, and how to recognize them when they're operating in you. Um, so that's point one. Then the idea is, when do they get triggered in your life so that you can be
Mm.
aware of them? So that the trigger point, what is it that triggers that? And then third, what do I need to do to replace this counterintuitive, this bad habit when I need to? And a lot of these habits serve you perfectly well in ordinary circumstances, but there are times when they don't. Um, so the idea of getting rid of an old habit. A, you don't get rid of it. You don't just say, no, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Right.
Habits will persist. They have to be replaced by another habit. So you design one that'll work well for you. And the other point about that is you can't just copy Elon Musk or Roy Rogers or some hero and just copy that. You have to find a way that the new habit you create is authentic to you and will integrate itself with the way you are as a human being. So I'll go back to me again. Uh, Conflict avoider, avoiding conflict. Well, how can I can recognize the trigger because I get a gut feeling that I can recognize that I'm getting into this conflict avoidance, and now what am I going to do about it? Um, so a way that works for me is to convert it from conflict to cooperation by asking questions. I'm a
Mm.
naturally inquisitive guy, so it's authentic to me to want to know more about a situation and work with the other guy to figure it out. That's a good way to deal with conflict. So it's a habit that works for me. I said if I'm starting to roll into a habit, instead of getting into argument mode and getting all pumped up and saying, well, let's get into this fight, I say, well, let's figure out what's going on here and figure out how to make it work for everybody. That works for me. Okay, is that a answer to
It
your question?
it is, and I'm going to dig a little bit deeper here, and I have not yet read your book. Shame on me, but I've got so many books that I'm reading right now. It's enough to make
Yeah,
one head spin.
yeah.
Um, let's talk about motives because you talk about the mind aspect of the thinking and the behavioral aspect of being.
Mhm.
What is the motivation? You mentioned you're a conflict avoider. So what was the impetus? Was it just that conversation where you had a threat that you might be fired or lose your job?
Oh, my motivation.
Yeah.
It built over the years. God, you don't want my life story, that'll bore you to tears. But
Well, no,
most of
give
my,
it, Alex, give
but
a taste bit.
okay, most of my life I have been seeking leadership positions in the Army for 12 years, up to the age of 30. In business, I would get myself promoted rapidly, and then I'd do mediocre work, and then I'd go someplace and try another job, and I wonder why there was a ceiling, seemed to be a ceiling in my abilities. Um, and then I got a job with Michael Gerber, who was the foremost business coach back in the 80s and 90s. Um, and I got a job for him. He's the one who almost fired me because I was this two-faced, no good SOB. But he also saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, that I had this developmental, there's some creativity to it, but my instinct in life has been to figure things out. Um, so for 4 years, I worked with him to take his book and convert it into a programmed way of doing coaching so that even a newly minted coach, not an experienced guy like you, but a 20-something guy, using these materials and with some other training, uh, could be an effective coach in any industry, any size business, anywhere in the world. At least the stuff that I created for him was used in 8 different countries ultimately,
Oh
with
my
about
gosh.
70 or 80 coaches, and it's still in use by them. Later on, I updated it, created a newer version, but when I created my own coaching business. But um, the motivation for me was mostly self-serving. But what triggered it for me, and one of the things I learned while working for Michael Gerber, was something he called primary aim, something I now call core purpose. The idea is that everyone has a deeply seated, probably unrecognized drive for something. And when you get down to what it really is, it's something that goes beyond yourself. You ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's the top of that. Maslow, for those who aren't familiar, is an old scientist some way back who identified what motivates people. The lowest needs are survival and avoidance of danger and nutrition in order to live, and then belonging with other groups, and then what he calls self-actualization, which means, getting some accomplishment in your life. But at the very top of that list, he put self-transcendence. And he didn't discover this until 10 years after he put his first list together. And he's now the standard for understanding how people are motivated to do things. Self-transcendence is always there within us, and it's has to do with the greater good, the bigger accomplishment beyond just yourself. If you're
Hmm.
talking about getting the CEO job, that's a self-serving idea. Although it could be self-transcendent if the purpose in getting a CEO job is to do greater works and have a greater benefit. So um, that's where I tapped into mine when I was working for Michael Gerber. Um, and I realized that was really satisfying to believe that I'm working not just to get more pay and not just to get a bigger responsibility and not to have a bigger footprint in the world, but to do something that had real value beyond myself. Anyway, I started realizing that. And about that time, I started studying cognitive science. Um, and while I'm working for him, I was also paying close attention to all the coaching that was going on and how things were happening with the coaches. One of the things we found out was that clients come of two flavors. The ones who sign up for coaching and leave after a couple months thinking, well, this isn't working for me. And the others who stay on for the long term and really get the positive results. They're the ones who engage. The ones who engage and say, okay, I got to get into this. I got to understand it. I got to learn how to be a business manager, an entrepreneur, a leader. The others just wanted you to say, tell me how to fix my problems and then go away.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
And that's really why I asked the motivational question. One, so you could tell us a little bit about your backstory, but you alluded to it, and we'll take this from you and I out to those who are listening, who may be leaders, CEOs, executives, or people who are just starting their own small business. A self-published author, for example, is a business owner, and a lot of our circle of folks who are authors, self-publishing, don't necessarily think like a traditional leader may.
yeah,
There's a disconnect there. So we can use that as kind of a springboard to look at this bigger than us type of thing. And you mentioned that it primarily initially it was self-serving, but it was also somebody else, Michael Gerber, speaking some truth into your life because he saw something in you to give you the encouragement to say, hey, you can rise up to a different level. So the motivational aspect that I want to kind of dig into a little bit bigger here is you touched on it earlier. There's a complacency factor. If things are working fine and I don't need to change, then why would I want to change if this is who I always am and there's
yeah,
quite honestly, I think there's a cognitive bias towards that's how I've always been. And it's just a negative self-talk that we do frequently.
yeah,
Even I do to this day. And how do we take this out of you and I to go back to Maslow's hierarchy of self-transcendence and get to that self-actualization part? Where is the motivator beyond the survival needs, beyond the belonging needs, beyond all this to say, hey, what I'm doing here is bigger than what I want in terms of money, finances, where I live, the car I drive, all that external, what I
yeah,
call bullshit, because that's what it is, with something that's more meaningful and tangible. How would you coach somebody who's already achieved all this as a leader, but they still feel like something's missing?
yeah. Um, so here's how you
That was
find
a lot. Sorry,
what's
that was a
meaningful.
lot.
No. There's the way you do it is to use people's own experience as their guiding light. Here's what to do. You take Joe or Sally. You say, Joe, Sally, draw a piece of paper and put a line left to right. And put on the left, put birth date, and put on the right, put present day. And I want you to above that line, write the most meaningful experiences you've had in your life.
Mm,
And below it, put the most disappointing. experiences you've had in your life. And they'll above the line and below the line, and they'll end up with anywhere from a dozen to 3 dozen elements. The time when you were a kid and you saw your dad stand up in a situation that was really great. You thought, boy, that is really cool. And you still remember it as inspirational. Or the time in college when you cheated on an exam and you're still embarrassed about that. It still bothers you that you did that on the negative side. Okay. You got a whole array of those experiences. That's where the meaning in your life is hidden. Now, to tease it out, to figure out what it is for you, and it'll be different for everybody, but there will be a common theme to it, I'm going to guarantee you. You tease it out by picking one of those instances. The example I use in one of my books is a guy talked about playing baseball when he was about 23 years ago in a business league, and he hit a home run. And he just remembers it to this day. It's one of the best experiences of his life. They won the game. It was a walk-off home run. And so they picked that experience. And now what we do is we say, okay, what about that experience was so meaningful to you? It's just a home run. It's just a sporting thing. What was meaningful to you? And he said something like, well, we won the game and I felt top high as a kite. All my teammates really loved me. And then the next thing you do is say, what was meaningful about that? Okay, we're digging in. We're starting to get into the unconscious stuff. What was meaningful about that? Well, he said, you should have seen their faces on my teammates. They were so damn happy. And okay, what was meaningful about that? Well, they were happy. I had something to do with making them happy. Okay, what was meaningful about that? Well, for a moment, I made their lives better. And then he paused and he looked up at the ceiling and said, oh my God, that's why it felt so good. I helped them make their lives better. Okay, so that's an example. So you get the good news, bad news lifeline. You pick one event and you dig in. But that's not enough because we're looking for a pattern here, not one event. You pick another event, and it could be positive or negative, and you say, okay, what was meaningful about that? And it'll answer. What was meaningful about it? You dig in. You do that 5, 6, 8, 10 times. Patterns start to emerge. And for this guy, the pattern that did emerge and stayed true was the idea of somehow making people's lives better. Okay. Now, in a business coaching context or in a life coaching context, this is probably where you spend more of your time. Understanding that motivation and having a way to capture it gives your client a North Star to be attracted to. Making people's lives better. That could take a lot of forms. In business, one of the things we found that is with business people, some of them were more drawn to things outside of business, and they were just suffering through their businesses as a way to make money. It's the only thing they knew, but they were really drawn in another way, and that's totally legitimate. Help them find a path towards where that deepest sense of motivation lives and thrives. And often it will be in the business because the business is and can be a tool for making that happen. But tapping into that deepest, most meaningful part of yourself is one of the things we do with our clients early on in every engagement within the first month. And we look for it. Then we call it I call it core purpose. Michael Gerber called it strategic intent. Another guy calls it greatest goal. Tony Robbins does it. He doesn't even have a name for it, but he drives for it. And the real gurus of coaching, who are more mentors than coaches, find a way to get to that early on in the relationship because that's where the deepest motivations are anchored.
Yeah. And thank you for walking through that. And I didn't do it just to put you on the spot, but this is kind of the stuff that seems esoteric, and we can dig through a lot of books, your books, some of the books I've written,
Yeah.
there's some great books out there. Charles Duhigg's books on habit
On habits, yeah.
is just a phenomenal book. And it's just there's a lot that's been done. Even James Clear book, Atomic Habits, which is still a perennial bestseller. But the reason I asked that question the way I did, Alex, is you've got hands-on tactile experience working with leaders in the enterprise
Yeah.
situation from academia. Not only that, going back to your pre-work a day world, being a captain in the military, I mean, it's your leadership has been a part of your life for a long time. And that's why I wanted to have you on the show. So let's flip
Well,
this
let me
just
say, I'm going to interrupt you because I want to say one more thing. Um, it starts to sound like a lot of psychological gobbledygook. And when you get down to it, it's real everyday practical stuff. It's how your mind works
yeah.
and using those same workings to make it work better. So it's not something to be shied away from because it's airy-fairy crapola or it's Jungian psychology. It's none of those things. It's how your mind works and how you use what you already know to make it better.
And that's what you were alluding to earlier too, is it doesn't have to be complicated. It's the simplest things and the questions of your process that you just outlined tremendously in a short amount of time here is going back and just saying, what's important about that? What's important about that?
Yeah.
Instead, you could use why too, but it's really getting down to the level that those clients end up getting to a place where it's not the surface or the external. It's not this. It's not what other people think I should have. You get to a core of, it was really, really fun to coach my son's little league team. They sucked. They were worse than the Bad News Bears. And the one highlight moment that I had was
Yeah, yeah.
when the actual manager got ejected because and this is a true story. I'm just going to allude to this real quick. He got ejected because he was arguing with the umpire about calling balls and strikes, and he wasn't there. I had to step in as manager for a game, and the kids are sitting there dejected in the dugout. And I kid you not, I've included it in one of my books. The kids were losing close to the 10-run rule, and it was like the
Hmm.
fourth inning or so. And I said, guys, this sucks, doesn't it? Yeah. And we looked down the line at all these kids. There's 13 kids on the team. I said, you know what? Here's the deal. You got nothing to lose. If every single one of you guys gets up to the batter's box and does the best that you can to get on base, and if more than 10 of you cross the plate, you know what? We're going to win the game. And I kid you not, Alex, I never forgot that because it wasn't about my ego. It wasn't about me stepping in as a manager. It was about the instilling the belief and the confidence in those kids. And by the time we started getting closer to tying the game up and the magic happened and the last kid crossed the plate, fans on each side saw exactly what was happening. And what you just described with that one story of somebody who said it was bigger than me. I never ever forgot it. I don't know if those kids remembered it, but those are the types of things that we get down to a tangible, really important thing that we can do. And
Yeah.
all of us have it. We don't have to overcomplicate it, right?
Right.
It's just guiding people
Yeah.
to that thing. So,
Well, one of the things you have to do is you have to raise a lot of your unconscious thinking to a conscious level. And that's why
exactly.
that repeating question technique does that. It's one of the ways you can get access to your unconscious mind. Your unconscious mind really rules you. Uh,
Sure it does.
90, in excess of 95% of your thought processes are unconscious. So let's not get into
So,
that in any great depth, but yeah.
well, no, but that's what you're talking about is it's a mindset, yes, but it's also being intentional. And that's why I asked the motivation question. Why would somebody want to change? If it's working, I'm not going to do anything. That to
Right.
me breeds complacency and it breeds laziness. And I too, like you, love to learn and I'm always a curious human being.
Yeah.
But if things are working, we may not be as inclined to want to change until somebody points out something to us, a blind spot,
Right.
or we go through some traumatic event that costs us dearly. And then we get what I call a, oh shit, wake up call. Like, I better pay attention to this.
Yeah.
So let's go back.
Well, a point about that, because successful people versus the coaching business has an open door because people don't come to a coach unless they got a problem, which
Yeah.
puts them in at least a little minimally receptive mindset. And you need that receptive mindset. A lot of successful people, especially the smarter ones, get it's not just complacent, it's smugness almost, of some
Mhm.
form of that, where I'm successful, what and what they don't know is as highly as they succeeded, how much more potential they have to do even greater things if they could get rid of some of these glitches that are happening. And I guarantee you they're happening even with successful people. So yeah, you can think of it as a formula. Your potential for success in the world, it's a function of three things. One is your basic horsepower, your mentality, your education, and your experience. And everybody knows education and experience can be built on and developed and so on, but no, not many people believe that their cognitive abilities can be enhanced. And that's kind of the message of these two books of mine. Um, no matter what your level of intelligence is now, you can actually get smarter. And I mean, literally, you can get smarter. You
Mm.
can exceed whatever the level of intelligence you've been exercising in your life by learning these things that impede it. And they're built into us. It's not a matter of choice, but the matter of choice is you can identify that and then you can do something to make them work for you instead of against you.
Yeah, and it comes back to too, why would I want to change? If and in the coaching
Yeah,
industry, people just like a doctor, you don't necessarily go to the doctor when you're feeling better unless you have regular scheduled checkups. There's usually a
yeah,
problem that you need to have examined, diagnosed, and address. Um,
yeah.
so
Well, I use when that question comes up, what I say is if you do it right, you're not changing, you just become a better version of you.
that's
And that's
true.
and that's what really has to happen. It has to be authentic, or these habits don't take hold.
But I also think that people, if there isn't a better version, they don't necessarily, some people don't even believe because they have cognitive bias to the contrary, that there is a better version of them. They have what I call, or other people have called, a victim mentality. It's not a growth mindset. If you want to read a great
Mhm.
book, if you haven't, Carol Dwyer's book, who's a professor down at Stanford, I believe, um, has done a phenomenal job with the book talking about this very thing. So let's dig into. I have question two on here that I sent you ahead of time. If cognitive development is the real edge for the next generation of leaders and entrepreneurs, what does it actually look like day to day? Is it a habit, a practice, a way of noticing your thinking? Give us some concrete versions, not just the concept.
Okay, let's see. What's a good one? You know what? Here, let me. I was going to give the gift. These are good examples.
Well, I'm teeing
Um,
you up for this because this is
yeah,
for us out to their people for the next
yeah,
generation, because there's a whole new generation that's not
yep,
boomer, the greatest generation, that's not millennial, that's not Gen X. There's another 2 to 4 generations coming after this. This podcast may be
yep,
out there forever. Here's an opportunity for you to speak to that generation or
yep.
future generations.
I'm going to give the listeners and you, and reinforce myself, two techniques. Now, one of the important things I work on developing, especially for business people, is strategic thinking. These two things are two aspects of strategic thinking. Okay, first one is whole mind thinking. WHOLE, whole mind thinking. That's not holism. That's that. Here's the idea. Most people are one of two types. They'll say, I'm intuitive, I trust my gut. Or the other one will say, give me the analysis and logic, and that's what I trust.
Hmm.
They're both short sheeting themselves because your mind was built to work both ways. We
Hmm.
learn at a young age to trust one or the other. But if you can learn to trust both in combination, they're checks and balances against each other. That will immediately improve your decision making. So here's an example. I could buy a house a while back. Okay, loved the house, nice neighborhood, looked really good. But I looked at it, boy, it felt really nice, and my intuition said, buy that son of a gun. But then I ran the numbers, and the numbers didn't work. But I wanted to buy it, and I
Hmm.
was kind of an intuitive guy, so I trust my gut. The numbers don't quite work, but we'll make it work. Okay, now what I'm advocating is keep driving the decision until both your intuition and your logic agree. So run the numbers. If that may not be the house, find another one. Do whatever you have to do so that the decision satisfies both the logical train of thought as well as the gut intuitive feel. Okay. So if you from this day on say, every important decision in my life must be accompanied by both a logical train that says yes and a gut feel that says yes. If either one of those is out of whack, dig deeper, decide differently, move ahead at it. If you start that from today, your decision making will improve, guaranteed. Okay.
That's huge. Folks, if you didn't hear what he just said, this is a common complaint that I have in this personal growth industry that I chose to be in. It's not either or, it's yes and.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Now the other one. It's what we call multi-vision. It's an aspect of strategic thinking also. There's a whole there's a whole developmental process that I lay out in the book about how to develop your strategic thinking. And that's one of the most important things for a leader. It's one of the four essential capabilities of a leader. It's called multivision. And the idea is that whenever you're encountering a situation, you're going to be inclined to wave in and dig whatever your normal path is. And I'm saying, do this to expand your view of it. Think, what are other ways to look at this? Or better yet, here's a better one. What would my worst enemy say about this? The one who's trying to make me
Mm.
look bad all the time. And what would he say or she say? And then you're going to reject that, and you probably should because he's your worst enemy. But the next step is, what's the grain of truth in it? So, you're exploring a new market, and you want to think about the viewpoint of the short term and the long term. That's part of multi-vision, two different points of view. You want to think, if you're in business, the business point of view, profitability and all that, and the customer's point of view, where does the customer get value, all that kind of stuff. Um, Ethical versus pragmatic are two ways of looking at something. Sometimes the ethical decision is no go, but the pragmatic decision is go, and then that leads you down all kinds of weird paths. In fact, I got something here. Okay, here are some ways that you think about multi-vision. Okay, if you look at an issue from, pick any of those things, one point of view or another, it will expand your thinking. It will make you look at more, it will make more possibilities evident to you. You'll start seeing opportunities that you didn't see before. You'll start perceiving threats and problems before they become threats or problems. You're expanding your point of view. So that's multi-vision, and it's forcing yourself out of your own head to see things from another way of seeing them.
That in and of itself, folks, he was holding up the sheet. I'm going to ask Alex to actually include that so I can put it in the show notes. If you're willing to give this away, I'm more than happy, and I'll put a
Oh
link to
yeah,
your book. We'll put it in the
yeah.
show notes. But folks, that one little nugget of just a simple word, multi-vision, being in the newspaper industry for the better part of the last 20 years, and Alex is also a columnist. There's a lot of truth to be that. You need to have both sides of a story, but my goodness, the simplicity of it, Alex. Do we
Yeah,
do we as human beings have this tendency to overcomplicate the shit out of everything? Because it's
yeah.
not necessary.
Well, the strategic thinking chapter of the book has six habits of strategic thinkers. These are two of them, and all
Okay.
six have a way that you can practice them. Now, and you can take one at a time, or you can, if your mind has the capacity, you can do a bunch of them. You can do it one way or another. But you start doing I'm sorry. The way to exercise each of these six habits is with a question. One is, what's another person's point of view? Another is, what's the intuitive version? What's the logical version? If you do that, just by doing it consciously, it'll gradually become an unconscious habitual way of thinking. It won't be think, let me look at the list, let me think, what is this multivision? What is that? As you do it, it starts integrating it into your mind. That's the way the brain works. It integrates things that you repeatedly do. In the early going, remembering to ask yourself these questions is a chore, and it might slow down your conversation a bit. It might feel a little bit awkward, but as you do it, it becomes natural. And as you keep doing it, it integrates itself and becomes the way you are.
This is powerful. So let's turn this out to the listeners and the viewers of this show. You've got a couple giveaways. How do people find your books and find you? And what do you need them to do in order to get these free giveaways? Just send you an email or what?
That'll work. I just gave them away right there. I have a website, www.alexalexander.org. You can go on there and you'll find my books. In fact, one thing is that I started writing children's books recently, if you can believe that. Where'd that come from? Um, the fundamental one, the basic primer, is the goldfish effect that generalizes across the population. If you want to upgrade your mind, you read that and you do the exercises. Now, when you read the book, you get overwhelmed. How can a human being do all this stuff? You don't do it all at once. You pick one that appeals to you, you work on it, it integrates itself in, becomes automatic, then you got room for the next one. This is the application of those ideas to leadership specifically. Talks about the
Okay.
four essential character capabilities of a leader. It talks about situational leadership. It talks about the fact that leadership is not about the leader. It's about the combination of the leader and the situation and the people involved. It's a three. I call it the rule of three. There's a lot to that. All the leadership stuff you'll see out there in the world is really good stuff. If you read it, if you try to use it, you get good results. But it's only part of the picture. The way to get the best results out of any leadership theory is is to do this work because that's the foundation of everything else, if that makes sense.
So you got the website. Do you want me to email you directly or is your email on the website? alexalexander.org, not .com, .org, because he said
Correct.
it's a nonprofit. And what else do you want? You get a couple parting words, and then I'm going to wrap up the show here for us.
Um,
It,
parting words, when you said that, the first thing that popped in my mind is be true to yourself.
be true to
And
yourself.
yeah, and that has a wide array of meanings. I talk about authenticity a lot. A lot of the work that people do is trying to become someone they're not.
Hmm.
All the work I do is trying to get you to be the best version of yourself. And that could be pretty damn good.
Yeah. Ergo, why I named this show Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You, because it's like
Perfect.
one of those things that you just kind of land there and it really
Yeah,
it falls there without any prompting. So
yeah, yeah.
yes, be true to yourself. And folks, I've been visiting for the last 45, 50 minutes with Alex Alexander. He's an author, as we already said at the top of the show, just a dynamite human being who understands this clearly in this conversation, understands what the cognitive abilities are of us to improve as human beings. Because as long as I'm breathing, Alex, I'm going to keep learning and I'm going to keep growing because it's just how I'm wired. Not everybody is necessarily wired the same way, but I
Well,
love
you can't help learning, but you want to learn the right things.
absolutely. So thank you for being the guest on the show. You know how to get a hold of them, folks. This has been Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You. I'm your host, Sean Langwell. And until next time, if you like the show, follow it. Look me up on my new website, which just launched yesterday. It's seanlangwell.com. There's lots of ways to interact with everything that I have going on in and around my own busy life. And we look forward to seeing you and hearing from you in whatever way that takes form of. So, Alex, thanks again.
Thanks for letting me join you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.